was a rainy afternoon when I found the old diary. I was helping my parents clean out the attic of our new house, an old, creaky place that always felt a little too quiet. We had just moved in, and there was something about the house that made me uneasy, but I figured going through the attic would keep me busy. As I sorted through dusty boxes filled with old stuff, I noticed a small leather-bound book stuck between two old trunks. The diary looked old, its cover worn and cracked. It caught my eye and I couldn't resist picking it up. The name Elizabeth was written on the first page in neat handwriting, followed by a date, October 2nd, 1923. I flipped through the pages, curious about what was inside. At first, it seemed like a normal diary. Elizabeth wrote about her days, her thoughts, and her dreams. But then, as I read more, things started to get strange. She began to describe events that seemed to match things happening in my own life. One entry talked about a new family moving into the house. She wrote about hearing strange noises at night and feeling like someone was watching her. That caught my attention. We had only been in the house for a week, but every night I had felt the same thing, like someone or something was watching me. Another entry from a few days later described finding a hidden room in the house. Elizabeth wrote about how she discovered it behind a wall in the attic, a small room filled with old furniture and a large, cracked mirror. My heart skipped a beat. Just yesterday, I had found a door in the attic that led to a hidden room. It was exactly as she described it, down to the broken mirror. As I read on, the diary started predicting things that hadn't happened yet. She wrote about a cold wind that would sweep through the house, making the windows rattle. That same night, a sudden chill filled the house, and the windows shook as if they were about to break. It felt like the house was alive. Reacting to the words in the diary, the entries became more disturbing. Elizabeth began to write about a shadowy figure that would appear at the foot of her bed, watching her while she slept. I tried to brush it off as just a story, but the fear started to creep in. I couldn't shake the feeling that the diary was somehow connected to me, predicting my future in terrifying detail. The last entry was the most chilling. Elizabeth wrote about a night when the figure would come closer, standing right beside her bed, whispering her name. She wrote that she knew it was coming for her and that she couldn't escape. Her handwriting had become shaky, almost frantic. The entry ended abruptly, with a single sentence: "It knows you're reading this." I slammed the diary shut, my heart pounding in my chest. The room suddenly felt colder, and the shadows in the corners seemed darker, deeper. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but the fear was too real. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made me jump. I kept the light on, staring at the door, half expecting to see a shadow move. But nothing happened. Maybe it was all just in my head, I thought. But then, just as I was starting to calm down, I heard it, a soft whisper, barely audible but clear enough to make the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It said my name. I froze, my eyes wide open, staring into the darkness. The whisper came again, closer this time. I felt a cold breath on my face, and I knew, deep down, that whatever had haunted Elizabeth was now coming for me. I grabbed the diary the next morning and threw it into the fireplace, watching as the flames consumed it. But the fear didn't go away. I could still feel the presence, still hear the faint whispers in the dead of night. The diary was gone, but whatever it had brought into my life wasn't. I realized then that the diary wasn't just predicting my future, it was controlling it. The events it described were happening because I was reading them. And now that I had tried to destroy it, the presence in the house was angry. I don't know what to do. I'm scared to sleep, scared to be alone in this house. But more than anything, I'm terrified of what will happen next. I tried everything to rid myself of the diary's curse. I burned it, buried the ashes, even tried to forget it ever existed. But nothing worked. The house still feels wrong, like it's alive and watching me. Every night I hear whispers, soft at first, then growing louder, more insistent. The shadows creep closer, and the cold breath on my neck returns. I know now that the diary didn't just tell my future. It sealed it. Whatever haunted Elizabeth is now after me, and there's no escape. If you ever find something like this, something that seems harmless but feels wrong, don't ignore it. Some doors are meant to stay closed, and some stories should never be read. If this story made you think twice, share your thoughts in the comments below, And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that chill you to the bone. I remember the night vividly, the one when my grandma shared with me the scariest story I'd ever heard. It was a cold, rainy evening, and the power had gone out, leaving the house in eerie darkness. The only light came from the flickering candles Grandma had set on the coffee table. The rain pattered against the windows, and the wind howled through the trees outside. It was the perfect night for a story. "Have I ever told you about the old house at the end of Birchwood Lane?" Grandma began, her voice low and mysterious. I shook my head, feeling a chill run down my spine even before she started. "What house?" I asked, trying to sound brave, but my voice quivered a little. "It's been abandoned for years now, but when I was a little girl it was the talk of the town," she said, her eyes narrowing as she recalled the memories. "People used to say it was cursed." "Cursed? Like haunted?" I whispered, leaning in closer. Grandma nodded slowly. "You could say that, but it was more than just ghosts. Something evil lived in that house, something that no one could explain. People avoided going near it, especially after dark." I felt a knot form in my stomach, but I was hooked. "What happened in that house, Grandma?" She took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to continue. "It was said that the house once belonged to a man named Mr. Hargrove. He was a reclusive old man, rarely seen in town. The locals believed he was into some sort of dark magic. They said he used to perform strange rituals in that house, trying to contact spirits from the other side." I couldn't help but interrupt. "Did he succeed? Did he actually contact spirits?" "Some say he did," Grandma replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But the spirits he called upon weren't friendly. One night there was a terrible storm, much like tonight. The townspeople heard screams coming from the house, but no one dared to go inside. When the storm finally passed, they found the house empty, except for Mr. Hargrove's journal." "What did the journal say?" I asked, my heart racing. "It was filled with strange symbols and passages written in a language no one could understand," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But there was one entry, written in English, that everyone could read. It said, 'I've made contact, but it's too late. They're coming for me.'" A shiver ran down my spine, and I pulled the blanket tighter around me. "What happened to Mr. Hargrove? No one knows for sure," Grandma said, leaning in closer. "But the house wasn't empty for long. A few weeks later, a family moved in. A husband, wife, and their young daughter. They had no idea about the house's dark history." I felt my heart sink. "Something bad happened to them, didn't it?" Grandma nodded gravely. "They were fine at first, but strange things started happening soon after they moved in. The little girl, Emily, began talking about an imaginary friend she called Mr. Black. At first, her parents thought it was harmless, but then she started saying things that no child should know." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely audible. She knew things about people in the town, dark secrets, things that even the people themselves had forgotten. Her parents were terrified, but they didn't know what to do. Then one night, Emily's father woke up to find her standing at the foot of his bed, staring at him with blank, lifeless eyes. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "What did he do?" He tried to shake her out of it, but she didn't respond. She just kept repeating, "Mr. Black is coming. Mr. Black is here." The next morning, they found her in the attic, sitting in front of an old mirror that had belonged to Mr. Hargrove. "What was she doing?" I asked, dread creeping into my voice. "She was smiling," Grandma said, her eyes widening with the memory. "But it wasn't her smile. It was cold, unnatural, like something was using her face to express its own twisted joy. They tried to take her out of the house, but she wouldn't go. She screamed and fought, saying that Mr. Black wouldn't let her leave." My heart was pounding now. "Did they ever get her out?" Grandma sighed, her expression darkening. "They did, eventually. But by then, Emily wasn't the same. She never spoke again, never smiled, never even acknowledged her parents. They say she lost her soul to whatever Mr. Hargrove had summoned. The family left town soon after, and the house has been abandoned ever since." I sat in silence, the weight of the story pressing down on me. The rain outside had stopped, but the wind still howled, sending chills through my body. "Do you think it's true, Grandma?" She looked at me with a solemn expression. "I've always believed that some places carry a darkness that we can't understand. That house, it's one of those places. So if you ever find yourself near Birchwood Lane, do me a favor and stay away. I nodded, the fear lingering long after the story ended. Even now, I can't pass by Birchwood Lane without feeling a cold shiver, remembering the scariest story my grandma ever told me. There's a house in our town that no one dares enter. It's been abandoned for as long as I can remember, standing at the end of Willow Street like a sentinel of fear. The windows are boarded up, the roof is sagging, and the garden is overgrown with wild, untamed weeds. But it's not the decay that keeps people away, it's the stories. It all started when I was a kid. My friends and I would ride our bikes past the house, daring each other to get closer, but none of us ever had the courage to go inside. There was something about it, something that made your skin crawl just by looking at it. The adults in town never talked about the house, but you could see the fear in their eyes whenever it was mentioned. One summer, curiosity got the better of us. We were all around 12 years old, too young to know better, but old enough to think we were invincible. My best friend Sam was the first to suggest it. "Why don't we go inside?" he said one afternoon as we stood at the edge of the overgrown lawn. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. "You're crazy," I replied, though the idea had already taken root in my mind. "What if it's haunted?" Sam shrugged. "That's the point, isn't it? Let's find out if the stories are true." The others hesitated, but eventually, our curiosity won out. We agreed to meet at the house after dark when our parents thought we were asleep. Looking back, I realize how foolish we were, but at the time, it felt like an adventure. That night, we gathered at the corner of Willow Street, our flashlights barely cutting through the thick darkness. The house loomed before us, more sinister in the moonlight than it had ever seemed during the day. "Are you sure about this?" Sophie, the only girl in our group, whispered. Sam nodded, though I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. "It's just an old house. What's the worst that could happen?" The worst that could happen. Those words echoed in my mind as we approached the front door. The air around the house felt different, heavier, as if the very atmosphere was trying to warn us away. But we ignored it. The door creaked open with a sound that sent shivers down my spine. Inside, the air was cold, much colder than it should have been for a summer night. Our flashlights revealed a dusty, decaying interior, broken furniture, peeling wallpaper, and a thick layer of dust that covered everything. But it was more than just abandoned. It felt wrong, like we were intruding on something that didn't want us there. "Let's check upstairs," Sam suggested, though his voice trembled. We climbed the stairs, each step groaning under our weight, until we reached the landing. There were several doors, all closed, but one stood out. It was at the end of the hall, slightly ajar, as if someone or something was waiting for us. We approached slowly, our hearts pounding in our chests. Sam pushed the door open, revealing a small, dark room. The only thing inside was an old mirror, its surface cracked and dirty. "What's so special about this room?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sam didn't answer. He was staring at the mirror, his face pale. "There's something wrong with this mirror." We all looked at it, and for a moment it was just a broken mirror in an abandoned house. But then, as we watched, the surface began to change. At first, it was just a flicker, a movement that could have been our imagination. But then it grew stronger. Shadows twisted and writhed within the glass, forming shapes that were almost human but not quite. Their faces were distorted, their eyes hollow and empty. "What is that?" Sophie whispered, taking a step back. None of us had an answer. We just stood there, frozen in place, as the shadows in the mirror seemed to notice us. One by one, they turned their hollow eyes towards us, and I felt a cold, creeping dread that paralyzed me. It was as if they were reaching out to us, trying to pull us into the mirror with them. "We need to get out of here," Sam said, his voice trembling with fear. But before we could move, the door slammed shut behind us, trapping us in the room with the cursed mirror. Panic set in as we banged on the door, screaming for help, but no one came. The air grew colder, and the shadows in the mirror grew more distinct, their forms solidifying as they pressed against the glass, trying to break through. It was Sophie who saved us. She grabbed a chair and threw it at the mirror with all her strength. The glass shattered, and the shadows inside let out a horrible, inhuman scream. The door flew open, and we bolted from the house, never looking back. We never spoke about what happened that night, not to each other, and certainly not to anyone else. But we all knew the truth. The stories were real. The house on Willow Street was haunted by something far worse than ghosts.